Trident Wargaming. Build it, paint it, play it. Hey guys, before we get this episode started, we'd like to send out a big shout out to our patrons, Frederick and Dustin. Thanks for the support. Every little bit helps. Getting a coffee, getting a brew as we sit down to work on projects for our podcast here. Also, we'd like to let you guys know with our new sponsor, Battle Bling. Check out their store. They've got about 200-ish products. Ranging from Titanicus to the Grim Dark nameplates and a whole bunch of bases, tokens, stuff like that, even stuff for Gaslands. So check them out. You got your Instagram and their Facebook pages and everything else. So hope you guys enjoy the episode. Catch you on the tabletop. Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Trident Wargaming. I'm Andy. I have special guest Chris here today, one of our local bolt action players. How's it going, Chris?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Very well, very well. Glad to have you on. This is going to be another bolt action episode. We're going through another army, and both me and Chris play this army, and it's the Army of France. So it should be a good little session here, going through the army, special rules, units and whatnot. And just so you know, guys, that we are mainly going through the main book of France and the Allies, mainly the France part of it. So should be good. But yeah, it's a different army, different flavor to it, I would say. And not a baguette, so we're going to go through this. But first, let's talk a little bit about hobby-wise. The hobby front. What do you got going on over there, Chris?
Recently I finished a German Martyr 3, and that's an excellent kit by Warlord, by the way. I know
Nice.
some of their kits can be hit or miss. I'm not looking at the Hetzer, but I'm looking at the Hetzer. But if you're thinking about it, that Martyr 3 is a good kit.
Very nice.
And finished up a Panzer 1, and that was also a Resin Warlord. And Soviet Assault Engineers, I got those buttoned up recently too.
Very good. Some good progress on minis.
Oh yes. How about you? What do you got going on?
Unfortunately, nothing bolt action related, really. Essentially, I've had to work on some Horus Heresy for the podcast and whatnot, but always got different projects on the go. Still got to finish off the DAC for pretty much next month. So for the 500 points that we got to get done for slow grow, which I do have to put out there. It has been very successful as of this far. Tons of players. I think we're sitting at 20 plus players for the slow grow, and just kind of getting prepped for that. For the different little local gatherings, and also the event coming up. Will actually be passed as this podcast is being released. Our Winterfront event, so it'll be a good little bolt action event, and yeah, just kind of been a little bit everywhere, just building stuff, painting stuff, going through some of the minis, and even just looking through books. So yeah, that's kind of where I am for my hobby. So I'll be picking up throughout the next few months. Be picking up on different projects and just getting stuff done, little by little. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. So I know I know sometimes it's tough to buckle down, trying to get certain projects done, but when I have like the certain projects that I'm working on, if I'm in the middle of working on them, I tend to make like little side notes to make sure that I know when I get back to them, okay, this is what I did, right? Especially with the paints and the colors and all that stuff. And luckily enough, with my with my Germans, they're actually fairly simple to get done, so I can take a couple days and just hammer out tons of miniatures, right? So it'll be good. So
Yeah, those DAC do look good on what you're working on.
thanks. Yeah, no, a lot of people have really liked the way they looked, so I was very pleased. It's funny because initially the first miniature that I did, and I did there was a post that I did about it, and it was okay. I wasn't quite happy with it. I followed one of the guys on YouTube. Um, Used his colors, kind of try to do the same thing he did, but everything kind of blended in too much, and I was like, don't like the look of this, so I'm gonna try it again. Found another guy, kind of changed up some colors, made the green on them, the tropical uniform, kind of show a little bit more,
Yep.
and yeah, it turned out, it worked out, and in my usual magic AK that I do, and yeah, we went from there. Let it rip, and got a whole bunch done. Like most of the infantry is probably done, which I still got to finish that video and post it as well, how I did it. And then we have a Panzer III that I got to do up, and the 88 as well.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I have the colors all set for them. Just need to get it on the airbrush and get going. And then I'm trying to do a little bit of like the weathering, like the chipping and stuff, especially with
Yep.
the desert colors. It really comes forward and shows, as you have these models all done up and whatnot. So yeah, that's kind of the game plan for them. And it'll be a pretty good feeling once I get those guys done, because for the last few years I've like worked on projects, but I haven't quite gotten them complete, and I kind of jump onto another project or another system, right? So my whole goal, part of my goal this year, is to get like a couple bolt action armies done, if not about 3 of them. So they'll be the first. I'll finish up the winter Germans, and then probably do an ally force, because I've been playing Germans for a long, long time. So
Fair enough.
yeah,
What Panzer III did you decide to go with? Did you do very historical and do the E, or did you do the, I believe it's L or M? What'd you choose?
I think it was the L that I did. I can't even remember now. But it's a warlord kit, and I ended up just kind of assembling it, and I didn't glue the cannons on it yet, so I can swap out for something I wanted. But yeah, I just essentially, I don't have it beside me here. It's kind of stored away. Otherwise, I would have showed you. I don't even have a list up. It's been a while. But I figured, well, like, I don't want to be running anything larger. I think a Panzer III is nice to have in there. It looks good. And it essentially is an effective tank for that era kind of thing. And it just matches the army, right? So it's good. I think it had medium anti-tank gun on it, and then machine guns. So
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're medium anti-tank,
yeah.
but I think it's the J. If you go in the Western Desert book, it's got the 50 millimeter, but the ammunition they used isn't the greatest, so I think it downgrades it to a pen value of 4. I
Okay.
think. Don't quote me on that. Everybody can send you the hate mail if I got that wrong.
Ah. Don't worry about it. It's your game. It's my game. We're playing. So yeah, like it's nice having the minis to do all that stuff. So whatever I choose. Like when I did my Germans, I had the Stug all done up in winter camo, and I took pictures of it, and instantly I had somebody saying, well, they didn't have that in Stalingrad and blah 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 blah, and I'm like, okay, like cool. Well, this is just my German force fighting in winter. Like here you go, have fun,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. Complain to the 9 hours of painting I put onto this thing.
yeah, exactly. So it's is what it is, but yeah, there's I just love it because like these kits have a lot of good options, and whatever you like to play, really, you know, that's bottom line. You essentially have invested your time into it, so wouldn't let anybody kind of hit you up on that just because maybe you got it wrong. Okay, well, cool. Let me play. Let me roll some dice. But going forward, we are going to be talking about this French army. I'm sure you get a little bit of flack at the local club, people teasing you or making some kind of baguette joke about the French and how the army runs and whatnot. I know I always get it, so
Yeah.
it's fun to play. I do
There's
enjoy
the
I do enjoy playing them.
there is the odd white flag joke made. I will admit that.
Run away. Yep. Yeah, I get that all the time too. I just pretty much play into it, right? Have fun with it. So that's good.
It's the only thing you can do.
Exactly. And then bust out those white and blue dice that we have with the
Yes,
rooster on it, right? So
absolutely.
Army of France. Let's go over their special rules. They're a little interesting. So like the first special rule is the communication breakdown. So essentially, they're trying to recreate the whole thing with the French command and the officers and whatnot. How there literally was a breakdown. They didn't really know what was going on, or it took too long to relay messages, or officers essentially had their own idea of what to do, or what they thought they should be doing, kind of thing. So in game terms, though, essentially on the first turn, you draw a dice like normal. If it's a French dice, your opponent can essentially put it back in the bag and redraw. Right? I think it's kind of a little cool thing just kind of throw in there. I'm glad it's only on the first turn. It couldn't be a critical moment, though. Depends, if you have your tanks lined up or something like that. But I don't think it's a game-breaking mechanic.
No, it's definitely just a flavor adder. Like you say, just the first turn of the game. If that was the first die of every turn, my goodness, that could be devastating at the wrong time.
Oh, 100%. It would probably like piss you off enough not to play the actual army, right?
Ooh, I don't know. There are Italian players out there, so.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So like overall, again, to me, it doesn't break anything. I do like how they've tried to put a little bit of that historical feel into it. Even though like when you actually are looking at the army and stuff as well, it's quite a nice looking army, with the miniatures, and we'll get into that a little later with miniatures. So having that in there just to kind of show, hey, you know what, the French really weren't that well prepared for this war. And this is kind of what happened, so let's put it into the game. So, the next one, Forward Artillery Doctrine, which is essentially what they did. They tend to fight with their artillery up front. So you pretty much get one free inexperienced or regular artillery unit, and that can be an anti-tank gun or an artillery piece. In addition to what you normally could purchase for points, right?
Yes. Now, I noticed when you play your army, Andy, you do the double regular medium howitzer.
That's right.
How do you find that works for you?
No pun intended. It's hit or miss. But essentially what it does for me is it becomes this big deterrent against the enemy, right? So like having the two my army tends to have a lot of pie plates. As an example, these two artillery pieces that mean, I don't know, like I would never take inexperienced or anything lower than a medium, right? I just, it's free. I don't see why you would, unless it's something thematic, right? Which is fine. But yeah, the two medium howitzers, being able to, if you can, line them up, get those nice open shots on units, taking out veterans, like I've mentioned before in the past with some of the tactic talk and stuff, even with preventing units going into buildings. So it's a pretty good deterrent. It's a pretty good unit buster. And sometimes I've even taken that straight on shot on vehicles and have blown them up. On the other hand, depending on your battlefield, there's been a lot of times where, because my army is so large, because I tend to run, and we'll talk about this with the next rule, I tend to run a lot of inexperienced units. I may overstep my deployment and kind of have them positioned in a bad spot, right? And I know you can get away with that with like spotters and whatnot, but sometimes I kind of cut points somewhere, and sometimes the spotter goes, which it's probably not the best idea, but I like to try to keep my infantry maxed as well if I can. So yeah,
absolutely.
Long story short, they're great if you can definitely use them to the full effectiveness against harder units to take out. They do great. I know I've put big, large Japanese squads down to like nothing because of these. So combination with this, combination with a mortar, combination with I usually take a char that has a howitzer on it as well. So there's a lot of shots going, right? So, but again, it's 50-50. I do enjoy having them on the field. I have multiple models for different types and stuff. So, but yeah, it's one of my favorite units. And most armies, not just my French, but I tend to take a howitzer for that. And I'm always looking for that direct shot, right? So
I'm pretty well the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, a light howitzer is almost always an auto include for me. I would take that over a mortar in most lists. But
Gotcha.
Specifically to the French, I take a bit of a different approach. I will pay for the light howitzer.
Right.
And I will take the free medium howitzer at regular, but I will not pay for a spotter.
Okay. Yeah.
And I do that because of the minimum range when you're doing indirect on a medium howitzer. It's atrocious, isn't it? Like 30 or 36 inches?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I find,
yeah,
if you're going to do double medium howitzers, I find you tend to get a deployment where they're either both on one side, where they're obviously the opponent's going to make that target number one, or you do kind of the crisscross where one is in either corner.
Yeah.
And you're shooting baskets over at each corner kind of thing.
Yeah. And again, when it comes to objectives, or not objectives, when it comes to missions and your army deployment, you have to kind of watch out because you end up stringing yourself out maybe a little too thin,
Yes.
and you don't have anything to protect it, or you get out deployed because you've lost the draw kind of thing or whatever, or you have to make a decision of what you're going to deploy. Well, that's two howitzers that I want to put on the field, but that's taking two out of my, as an example, two out of my 5 units that I'm allowed to put on the board. Well, what are you gonna do,
Yep.
right? Like, or you get that weird mission where the opponent is coming on from a different board edge, and you're in the corner, so you can technically get hit from the other board edge, and then you're losing that artillery piece because they're hitting you in the flank, kind of thing, right?
And you're not getting your gun shield rule when they do that.
Exactly. So it's a good doctrine. I like it. A free unit in any army is great, and there's a few of them, as we know. Having the artillery piece, I do like it. The French definitely used tons of artillery. World War One, World War Two. So right on that one. Other people might say it's it's a little OP, but essentially looking at that and then looking throughout the rest of the army, the options that they have, they are slightly limited. So I'll give it to them for that, right? What do we got next? Yes, the other one I like, the other free unit. So hurriedly conscripted reserves. Now, this allows you to take 3 or more inexperienced infantry sections, and then you'll get a infantry section free of that's identical to your cheapest one that you've made. So I tend to try to keep these units the same size. If I can max them out, I'll max them out. They're inexperienced. This way I get that 4th inexperienced unit for free maxed out. Right? So essentially I'm running like 40 guys on the field just from this alone, which is a fair bit. And yes, they are inexperienced, so it's going to be tougher to score hits and whatnot, and it's going to be easier to get hits. But man, you got bodies on the table, right?
Oh, well, I also play Soviets, so
Mm-hmm.
man, is that a good feeling. Drown them in models. It's the
Pretty
way to do it.
much. Pretty much. The only downside about this, with my model selection, the mini section that I take, um, everything except my char is in pewter. So my case is actually pretty heavy when I do this list. So it's a little troublesome in that manner. Chris went the other route, so he's got a lot more plastic than I do.
Yes.
But
Did you want to hit that topic later, or you want to hit that one now?
we can do that now, actually, because essentially this one, that's what it is. If you want to play an experience, this is the one to go. If not,
Yep.
you have options: regulars, veterans, and as we go through this, you'll see which ones there are. But in saying that, yeah. So Warlord Games is pretty much where I got my minis from. And do I have it here on my wall? Yes, I do. 1 second. So that is the other set. Chris, you got this set as well, right?
Yes, I did. All my infantry are the plastic.
Yeah. So it's a really good set in plastic for the French, and hopefully they're coming out with some plastic French for Warlord Games as well. But essentially, both minis are great. There's a lot of detail to each mini. Posing wise, I think the plastic ones are a bit more posable.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
but
Those were.
as you said before, Chris, when you were putting them together, you were saying something about the arms for those
Yeah,
plastic miniatures.
actually, I was just going to bring that up. It is 100% worth your time to take it easy and don't cut anything out. Just look over the sprues multiple times because they do not give you an instruction booklet that
Okay.
puts it in black and white for you. So you got to do a little bit of interpretation and the numbers, because of course I'm specifically talking the World War II French.
Yeah.
So they have a weapons sprue that gets you all the World War II era weapons. So there's a bit of overlap between the generic body sprue and the World War II weapons. So take your time and make sure you match up the arms. And I always cut them out and use a little bit of blue tack that I always used for posters as a kid and tack the arms together so you can see how they align
Oh,
and
okay.
then glue things afterwards. That's my tip on that.
Kind of like a dry fit. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
very
good
much
idea.
so.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Prevent the gluing of the wrong arms or the glue on the fingers or, getting that arm stuck on your finger kind of thing, depending on what kind of glue you're using. Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I think I may have assembled one miniature because I was going to do an unboxing of them. But they're a nice set, and you get a lot of them. And not only that, they have, I believe, the Senegalese in that as well.
Yes, they do, because mine are plastic Senegalese.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
um, so miniature wise, like myself, uh, before that set even came out, I went hardcore on the French for Warlord games, and I do like the miniatures. They are a lot of different poses. You got a lot of prone, kind of kneeling poses. Uh, different soldiers kind of pointing one way. You have your VB launcher, which is in here too, on a few of them. But again, they are pewter, so it's like you have only so many poses that they have created, and they're nice poses. They're nice minis. Their rifles are a little too thin for my liking. They can easily get bent. They can easily break. In that extent, right? I still have to figure out a good, decent research on stuff for maybe protecting them better or sealing them to make them a little bit stronger, kind of thing. But essentially, you have to watch out because like the guns are very long. The rifles are fairly long and pointy, and you can easily kind of bend, the rifles and stuff. The rest of the models are great. They're solid, right? And they have character to them. They got their long coats and whatnot. So really nice miniatures as well. So I have those. Uh, Not only is it just the infantry I have the artillery pieces, which are pewter. Your anti-tank rifle, your MMG, your mortar teams, those are all pewter as well. And they're pretty basic to put together, just like any other army that's pewter like that for Warlord games. You know, um, what else is there?
Two scales mix really well. That's
Yeah,
often a question that comes up. So I always found when I assembled, because I did all Wargames Atlantic for all my infantry,
yep,
and then the weapon teams and artillery, I stuck with Warlord.
yep.
And when you first put them, when they're unpainted pewter beside gray plastic, I was looking at it and I thought, man, like, I don't think I'm going to be happy with this. But keep the faith. Once you paint them up, they mix in perfectly.
Nice. Yeah, I did. I do remember putting them side by side and taking pictures of them, and I think the plastic miniatures are just slightly bigger, but not by much. So when it's all together, like you said, it blends in quite well. So, and then your tanks and whatnot. Again, you have the char that is plastic, and then and these are like Warlord game models and whatnot, minis, and I think it's the Renaults, even the Lafley. It's resin, right? Resin and pewter, a hybrid. So a lot of small models like that, little pieces, but essentially you're having, World War II tanks and stuff that you might not be able to find in other scales or other companies. There are a couple other companies out there that do make other miniatures. I do remember seeing like the Foreign Legion. There's a whole bunch of miniatures for that kind of stuff, and then a couple of like the mechanized, motorized, I should say, units as well, and even some like the sidecars and motorbikes, and then there's cavalry too, which I do have. I just don't have assembled, which are nice kits as well. So overall, I like them. I like both of them. I even thought of switching over more to plastic. Just seemed like a really nice kit, and if I can work in plastic a bit more, I'll kind of go that route. So instead of having, 50, 60 infantry, I'll probably have like 120. Just saying.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. I think
The last thing with those War Games Atlantic infantry,
Mhm.
if anybody out there is like me and plays Chain of Command, also for the button counters out there, some of the platoons, their fire and maneuver elements and some of their more static elements actually use different rifles. I believe they split one fire team down into fusiliers, and the other one, I forget what the term is, but some will use carbine rifles, and then some will use full rifle length rifles.
Okay.
And in that War Games Atlantic kit, there's enough rifles to make that platoon historically accurate.
Nice. I'll have to check that out again. But it's pretty cool. I like that. More options. So essentially, those are the special rules for the French, and also miniatures, which we've expressed there. There are other companies that do make other miniatures. You can find them online. I don't have the specific names for all the companies and stuff, but you can just do a search and you'll find something you like. I know that. The other thing with the French is they do have the option of the VB launcher in a lot of their squads, a lot of their infantry sections. I find these to be pretty expensive for 20 points a pop. 6 to 18 inch range, one shot, HE. And I think this has a little bit of the old first edition rules in it. Because it's an indirect fire, but it says D2. So I think it's just a small 1-inch blast, essentially.
Yeah, pretty well. I think you could spam those. No, sorry, you can't spam those quite like a Japanese Grenadier squad, where they can get 3.
Yeah.
So these would be more of a sprinkled throughout your army.
Yeah. Yeah, essentially. I do know, not in the main book here, but in the Battle of France campaign book, which we'll touch on at a later time. There is a unit that literally is a VB launcher unit, so all the guys in it can have it. It's expensive. I don't know if I would actually take it or not, but there is that option, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'll save the juicy details on that for when you do the Battle of France. But there is a caveat with that unit that I believe you need to buy at least 3 squads of very expensive infantry before you're even eligible to take that.
Yeah, that's right. Now I remember that too. It's been a while since I've looked at that book, but carrying forward. So your HQ and units and whatnot, they're all pretty generic. Your medic, your forward observers, same kind of idea. Very generic. As you go forward into like the infantry and whatnot, Again, you have your infantry sections, which are both regular and inexperienced. The one thing I do know with the French is their selection of SMGs is kind of weird. So, first off, you're allowed to upgrade a guy with a pistol, right? And that guy who has the pistol, if you have an LMG, he's your loader. So, in that sense, you're like, okay, he's loading, he's not firing, he can have a pistol, I'm not going to spend any more points. Well, if you want to have an SMG, it actually replaces the guy who has the pistol. And I can't wrap my head around it because it's like, well, I get what it's going to be used for, more for that close range fighting, the close combat kind of thing. That one guy with the SMG. But essentially, he's not going to really be doing anything if you're firing your LMG, right? So, I don't know. I don't know if I would take the SMG in the squads.
If I was playing hardcore competitive, I would not do that SMG. Because you still got Tough Fighter with the pistol.
Yeah, that's true.
So, if you're maxing out your infantry squads, let's say you take 5 infantry squads and you're saving 3 points, there's 15 points saved just doing one soldier with the pistol. Yeah. And that 15 points you could put towards something else.
No, that's a very good point. No.
Without really sacrificing too much. Of course, it would be the one shot at 6 inches versus 2 at 12. But I mean, if you're doing that with already having the LMG in the squad, you're not really going to miss out on the capabilities of an SMG.
No, that's true. And there are other units that you can capitalize on SMGs. So, fear not if you have miniatures that are just sitting there. You do have other options to making other units that you may or may not want to use, but it's there. They also do have the option of the VB launcher at 20 points. Again, I think 20 points is a lot for that weapon. But it is an option. So what you can use it for, you can lay smoke with it, I think. Or taking out some light vehicles, transport, stuff like that. But again, you're always going to need a 6, right? So it's I don't know if it's worth it. I have tons of miniatures for it. A lot of times I don't take it, just because of that 20 points. Again, 20 points a unit, it adds up. You could have a whole other unit for that, in a sense.
Kind of puts your infantry section in an awkward spot too, because a VB launcher. Let me flip back a page here.
Yep.
Is range 6 to 18 inches. That's relatively close range. So if you were thinking of sitting back with an LMG in the squad and handing out at least one pin a turn kind of thing, 18 inches, that's not helping you really.
No.
Just makes it awkward, I find.
It's a nice little add-on, to show what they were using back then too. Because really no other, there might be other armies or units that do use something similar to it, but you don't really see it too much on the board. So yeah, take it or leave it. Let us know. What do you guys think? Maybe you have another idea behind it, what you use it for. Let me know. It'd be interesting to see what you guys think. So the next few units, depending on which one it is, I may butcher some of these names. So, so we have the Dragoons Ports, or Dragon Ports, however you want to pronounce that. Chris, you might know better than I do, but
surprisingly, no, I don't. You'd think my last name would say I should know how to, but no, I don't.
But essentially, these are the more motorized infantry sections that the French, had. Uh, they're usually about 10 men strong. You get an SMG for your NCO, 2 LMGs in this one, VB launchers, and then like anti-tank grenades as well. So uh, you start getting into a little bit more solid units with these. I think I didn't have this written down. I think these guys can be regular, right?
Yeah, the dragoons and the chasseurs, they're regulars. There is no other
There you go.
option for them.
There you go. And these guys, like I like to put these in the transport and zip them around, having regulars, kind of getting them to where I want them. I even have different models for them to represent them in the army, which is pretty neat. So these are your regulars, double LMGs, which I like.
That double LMG is not common for early war. Riding
Yes.
on the heels of your last podcast with the armies of Great Britain,
Yep.
a lot of armies don't get double LMGs until very late in the war.
No, that's true. Yep. It's great to see, and that's the thing too with this army. From the book, it's you're fighting early war, right?
Oh yeah.
I know myself when I first was starting into bolt action, that's kind of what I was doing. Is I was actually building armies from the early war, right? I quite enjoyed it. I definitely did play against a lot of players who were doing mid late and a lot more late than anything. But always being that player who kind of a little bit of the underdog, and playing inexperienced armies against all these veteran armies, and just trying to make not hard for myself, but there's that challenge. There's that breaking of the mold kind of thing, right? To show, hey, you know what, this is viable too, right? Plus, kind of that little theme with the French, right? That their infantry were of all sorts of in experience, just due to the fact of the way, they didn't really want to fight another war, and there was a lot of their army that were just kind of laid back and did not want to fight. So they had a lot of inexperience. They had a lot of regulars that were there, veterans. But when they rushed for that, conscription, pretty much, a lot of new faces. So going into the early war with this unit, you can have a good time with them. They can be your meat and potatoes of your army, right? If you want to do a mechanized, motorized army, you can do that with this. There's some nice little transports and stuff you can take for the army. And then of course it's nice too for that theme, the thematic part of the army too. You can build your force around this. So
Speaking of theme too, the dragoons and the chasseurs,
yep.
I believe they had blue trousers. So if you want some color in a sea of olive drab, I believe these guys had a little bit different uniforms. So
Nice. Yeah. See, and that's the one thing too about this game and the hobby is, and especially with the World War II and historicals, is like, I don't have them with me in front of me. I know they're on my shelf behind me, but there's a whole bunch of reference books out there, and even the internet, right? Obviously, but there's all this information and pictures and drawings and just photos and whatever of these units that you can relate to, that you can make your army pretty much out of what you're seeing and reading and stuff. So I love it. I love the whole starting a new army and checking stuff out, So next up, what is it? The Group Frank, the SES veterans, pretty much. So these are like elite formations, I guess, of the French army. And
Pretty well, yeah.
so they're 11-man units, which is interesting from what I remember. And again, they are the same kind of thing, the two LMGs. But these guys can have up to 4 SMGs. So you can definitely make them kind of your assault units, which as veterans, that's pretty decent.
That is wild for early war.
Yeah.
Possibly up to 4 SMGs in a squad. That's really good.
Yeah. And I'm sure some of the transports out there, because I know there's some like armored transports in the back here that you may not be using 11-man units. Maybe you're going smaller, and then if you're using them as those little assault units, well, perfect weapon is that SMG, right? So you can bring that out. As for miniatures and whatnot, I haven't really looked too deep into these for that, but I'm sure there's a lot out there.
Yeah, I'm in about the same boat.
Yeah, but veterans nonetheless. That's one of the units that you have options for as a veteran. So, if that's your jam, which I know a lot of players do go that route with veterans, then one of those units to look at. Essentially,
It's interesting you bring up the 11 man or
yep.
the 11 model count as your full squad there. I believe that was actually their historical TO&E
Okay.
for the way they organized their infantry. I think.
Yeah, I'm actually not 100% sure on that. I'm just going by the book here, but definitely something to look at and do a little bit more research on. But yeah, it's going through a lot of these army books and the different nations, how their units are made up. It's interesting to see, like the Japanese have these large units, but they really don't have that many options in them. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
So, and then you have other units, and even like the Germans, they're usually pretty expensive to take. But then, like I've been taking these Schützen squads, and they're 8-man teams, but they have 2 LMGs in them. So it's like, okay, when you put them on the battlefield, you got to really watch out how you play them, because you start taking hits and it's game over for them instantly. So
There's your target number 1 for your double medium howitzers.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, but having units like this that are veteran, they're a little bit more sustainable on the board. Put them in a good defensive spot, and they can do some work for sure. For sure. Next up, the Foreign Legion Veteran Infantry section. That, again, is another veteran unit. 10-man. Same kind of loadout as your regular section. Pistol, SMG, LMG, VB launcher. Except they have stubborn. And again, this is another unit that very thematic. You can find those miniatures out there, which I know there are because I've seen them. And you can make that army. They have them in Africa and whatnot. Have all those trucks, whatever transports that they're using and stuff. So, and making that veteran army, that's a perfect, kind of force or unit to base your army on.
And don't underestimate that stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
Having just played a lot of British Airborne, on paper, stubborn may not seem like that great of a rule. as a little, it's a free bonus kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it has saved my bacon numerous times.
Yeah, well, I mean, because essentially it's when you're broken, like you're cut down to half, right? Like casualties for that one shot kind of thing. You get the test on your full morale, regardless of pins and stuff. So, if you're thinking about it, like, you're probably already taking a few hits. You probably already have a few pins on you. Let's say 2, you know. Just being able to still have your full leadership morale value. Like you said, it's going to save your
Yep.
ass, right?
Especially being veteran to begin with.
Yeah.
Like, without diving into it too hard, the average dice roll you're going to make on 2 dice is 7.
There you
So
go.
if you, let's say you had 3 pins and you were a regular veterancy, more often than not, you're not going to make that roll.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Survivability. That's what they're about, essentially. But and it ties into, the Foreign Legion, right? They won't give up no matter what.
And if people are interested in the Foreign Legion, I believe they have a large section somewhere towards the back of the Western Desert campaign book.
Yeah, that is true. It's a good campaign book as well. So definitely check them out if that's what you're into, right? So we have a few more units for the infantry. These start getting a little interesting. The Senegalese colonial troops, pretty much. Regulars. 10-man, pistol, SMG, LMG, VB launcher, just like all the others. Except these guys have these machetes that give them pretty much a tough fighter. So, and they are regular based. So these troops pretty much were sent, used in the armies were pretty much where they were needed, or where they kind of were from, and they wore the same uniforms. They had different, different headdresses sometimes, but they're distinct things. Like if you look at the models, the minis is their machetes, which are pretty neat. But again, it's a good unit. I tend to take them every once in a while, throw them in a truck, and put them where they're needed. Sometimes that truck gets blown up quite quickly, but that's part of the game. So I do like the unit. It gives you that other option. Gives you a close combat option for the army. That could be fairly reliable. So, and how about you, Chris? Do you concur, or do you use them a different way?
I don't have a truck for my French yet.
Okay.
So I've been foot slogging these guys. And coming from playing a very heavy veteran, a veteran heavy army recently, I'm kind of trying to figure these guys out. Because if they were veteran, say like the next entry,
Yeah.
pretty simple, run them forward. You don't need a truck, really. The 5+ will keep them alive, and then the tough fighters will do some work for you. But I find being regular and then in conversations with your opponent when they find out they're tough fighters, I find they become target number 1. But that's probably more me putting them in the wrong place. Just me learning, more or less.
Well, fair enough. It's the close quarter fighting in bolt action. It's very simple compared to first edition. It is very simple, but at the same time, you may not experience enough of it to really kind of be like successful at it, I guess, in a sense, right? Because like with these guys, if you're able to, like, you wanted to go after another regular unit or inexperienced unit, but depending on who you're playing, there might not be that option. If you're going against veterans, I would take a step back and double think that, that order. Like, veterans are very hard to knock out. Close combat wise, your numbers are worse than his. His or hers, right? So depending what they're facing up against is essentially what you look at. Essentially, do you have the numbers? Because you may make an assault, but if you're rolling those dice and you're not getting those hits, you're going to lose that unit quick. So
That's an excellent point. Because if I was playing my airborne and you ran these against me, I would welcome that combat.
yeah,
I would take my chances.
and that's it. Like, there's other units and there's other nation rules that taking on these guys, there's stuff that you can do, right? And there's other units that just have a little bit better rules than these guys. So I think what happens is, just because of that, that whole unit has tough fighters, right? And they're regulars or they're veterans or whatever the case may be. I think sometimes you get the superhero kind of effect, where you think these guys are going to be maybe a little bit invincible because they have the tough fighter rule, whereas that may not be the case, right? It's all depending on the situation that you're in, because there is other units that, not only do they have tough fighters, they also have another rule that essentially they can't break, or they keep fighting, or they get extra hits for however many guys they have, kind of thing, right? So
I equate these guys almost to like the NKVD for the Soviet, where they're kind of in an awkward spot where the NKVD, you can purchase them as fanatics. So veteran fanatics, that's nothing to joke about. But regular fanatics, it's in that price point where you paid the points, but I don't think you'll get the mileage out of the points per model.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's a good point. If you do like the unit, though, like, by all means, throw them out there. See how you do. Again, maybe you have different tactics. Maybe your whole army is based off of these guys. I haven't seen it yet, but could be interesting to see. Might even try it, let us know. Next up, so the Moroccan Gomier, they're veteran auxiliary troops. Pretty much similar to the Senegalese, except their weapon options, they don't have as much, right? They're essentially just what do they have? LMG, I believe they can take. So they're veterans, though. That's the thing, and they have tough fighters. So it's, yeah, there you go, light machine gun. So in a sense, you probably would take these guys instead, right?
I would, yeah.
So they're going to be tougher in combat. Same kind of idea as what we were talking about the Senegalese. So do some damage to these guys. It can be a deterrent. They can kind of shadow other enemy units and then make their move when it's right. Miniature wise, there are a couple companies out there that do make some of these miniatures that would fit these guys. But essentially, yeah, just straightforward veterans with an LMG option that has tough fighters. It's pretty simple, straightforward. They want to go in there and punch somebody. So
they do lack that distinctive option. I find when you get a veteran tough fighter unit, it's very tempting to put SMGs in them.
Yeah.
So let's say you had a scenario where you're jumping them out of a truck. I've often been in a scenario where you think, am I better off to shoot that 4-man squad with all my extra dice, or am I better off to assault them and risk the roll-off? Where these even though they would be cheaper, it removes that temptation. You know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
You're not going to shoot them with rifles.
No. No. That's very true. And you know what? I've made that mistake before too, where I have the firepower, but yet I go and I assault anyways, right? And it could be just, I get that superhero feeling. These guys aren't going to die because they're going to go in combat, and because I have tough fighter because of this, because of the SMGs or something like that, I go in and then we roll off and I roll poorly, and then I lose that unit. Right? It happens all the time. These guys, like you said, I would throw them in there. Wouldn't even worry about it. Just go, do their thing. If they win, awesome, right? If you put them in a spot where you know you have a way better chance, even better. So put them up against some units that you know you'll have the advantage of. Doesn't hurt at all. Next, we have the cavalry section, and they can be, I think, a regular and or vets. 13-man strong. They have LMGs, or one LMG. The interesting thing with them is when they're mounted, I believe their rifles are like used as like pistols.
That seems really punitive.
Yeah. So there's that, and then when they're on foot, they're rifles. So, like,
But there are a lot of other bonuses for being cavalry in bolt action.
yes, definitely is. And movement is just great for getting them somewhere, wherever you need, right? And I mean, what other armies really have cavalry?
Germans, Polish.
Polish and Germans. Yeah. I don't know if the Soviets had any. Don't recall. I don't remember seeing them in the books. But definitely these three.
Yeah, I don't think the Soviets have cavalry.
Yeah, I thought maybe they did, but could be a different game I'm thinking of. Maybe a different time period.
Entirely possible.
But yeah, you don't see cavalry on the board that often, right?
Yeah, I've never dibble-dabbled in the cavalry use. And to be honest, I've never played against cavalry in bolt action.
Yeah, I've seen them. Pretty much, it's like you get your first move and they're halfway up the board already, kind of thing, and then they dismount, right? And then that's it. Now they're just a infantry unit, kind of thing. So interesting unit. I have some models for it still in blisters, so that tells you a lot. So eventually they'll get on the board. But you also do have a motorbike section as well. So very mobile again. Put an LMG in there, kind of thing. So very cool looking, thematic kind of units. These even like the cavalry and the motorbike section, right? So you can definitely play around with the army. You can have the theme to your army in a whole bunch of different ways. Just with a few of these units, you can add on these units to your regular force, kind of thing, and make something unique, or something to maybe what you like to play and just have fun with. So, but overall, these units, they have their strengths and weaknesses, just like everything else. Most of them are very generic compared to some of the other armies as well. Again, that era of the war, you weren't seeing a lot of the advanced tech yet, right? As you see throughout, and you go to the late war, and you go to the larger nations, that started getting all this fancy equipment. Some of the units that they are lacking for like infantry is kind of like your anti-tank, like bazookas and Panzerschrecks and stuff like that. Obviously, they don't have any. And then you also have like flamethrower units. They don't have any in the book.
They
And
do add a flamethrower in the engineer section in the Battle of France
there you
book.
go. So
But that being said, I actually had to read into it myself. And because of the doctrine that the French army had at the outbreak of the war, being pretty much purely defensive,
yeah,
they viewed a flamethrower as an offensive weapon. So they had very few, enough to say they didn't have them.
huh.
So if you don't care about button counting, have at her. But there's a interesting little bit of useless knowledge for everybody.
um, that's that's good. It's I didn't even know that myself really. But the nice thing is, just from this book alone, these are kind of the options. But you do have other books in the game that can give you even more options, which is nice. I do like that they did expand on them throughout a couple of the campaign books. It gives them some nice options and nice flair to the army. And me personally, I think it's such an iconic army as well. The uniform, the helmet, the look of the army, and then being able to get an army all painted up and on the field. I think it's pretty iconic looking, and not a lot of players play them. You know, I played them for a bit. I haven't played them in a while, and then Chris has started playing them as well, which is pretty neat. Which I'm pretty happy to see on the board when they'll be all painted up before mine. That's for sure. So,
Well, in all fairness, this is my slow grow army.
yep,
So yeah,
that's good.
where yours was the deck, so I wouldn't feel bad by any means.
Oh no, no, no. I just I know when I started them, I got into that mode of like get them all assembled and get them on the board so I could start playing them, kind of thing, right? And then I didn't really sink too much time into trying to paint. I did get some color on, but yeah, that's a different story. So, yeah, continuing forward, the other teams like MMG teams, boys, anti-tank rifles, sniper teams, light, medium mortars, all pretty generic. Not a lot on them. I do know they don't have any heavy mortars in this book. I don't really know if too many armies even really had that option. I was so used to playing Soviets that had it, so French don't have it in this book, so might have it in the other campaign books and stuff.
Their light mortar is a 3-man team, though. Most are 2.
That is true.
I think the American one is also a 3-man team, but you definitely lose out with the 3-man team. You no longer get the small team bonus when they're being shot at.
Yeah, that's true. It's very true. Usually get hit by a sniper anyways, so
Dirty snipers.
There goes the gun. So, yeah, and then like as you go into like your artillery and stuff as well, pretty generic light, medium, heavies. Gun shields. You have those options. They do talk about the type of which models of artillery and whatnot in there, and kind of where they fit in, just like every other book. So there's those options. Your anti-tank guns, essentially, you have your lights and your mediums. There is no heavy guns in this book. So they do have one unit of it's a light anti-tank gun where you can downgrade to a low velocity, and you'll find in the French army and units, and especially when you start looking into their tanks, there's actually a lot of low velocity. So essentially, it's a 3+ pen instead of a 4. for your anti-tank guns. So they weren't quite there yet. You know what I mean?
Did you notice on that light anti-tank gun entry, it says Team 2 men?
Did not
Yeah.
notice that actually.
Where most other armies are 3 men, but for the same price of 50 points. Now, I also had to look this up. Artillery pieces do not benefit from small team. If they did, that would be the deal of the century right there. You might actually want to take one, but
yeah, that's interesting, eh?
interesting little thing to catch. But of course, if you go to the Warlord Games website, that model, if you buy it from Warlord, I believe it comes with 3 models.
Oh, it probably does. Maybe it's
Same
a typo.
with the light artillery model. If you buy that from Warlord, the team comes with 3 men, but the model comes with 4.
Yeah, I think I might have that one actually. Can't remember. I know I do have one that has like 4 guys on it, so it's interesting. Don't know the purpose of that or reasoning behind it, but yeah, I guess it
Call
is
it a
what it
free
is.
model.
More
You're getting a
miniatures.
deal.
More miniatures. Yeah. There you go. They do have an anti-aircraft gun, the Hotchkiss anti-aircraft gun. Essentially, you can add a second autocannon to it for an extra 30 points. So 2 autocannons, light autocannons. It's really their only option for that. And then we roll into the vehicles. So a lot of tanks, very similar tanks. Let's look at here. We have the Renault. It's an armored carrier. So these, 7+ armored carriers. Again, going back to some of these rules that a lot of the tanks have and whatnot, is you're going to find 1-man turret. That was a thing with the French. Usually the commander was also like the gunner, right? So they have the 1-man turret. So essentially, if you're doing an advance order, even if you don't have any pins on you, you have to make an order test. And sometimes that sucks. So there is, when you read into that, it's apparently it's only on the advance orders. So if you're doing a run, that's kind of, you kind of veto that. So again, if you have a tank like that's off the board, you're going to be running to try to get him on the board, in a sense, right? And it's kind of weird because like usually when you're off the board, you got to make an order test anyways. So I've had a lot of guys ask, well, do I have to make an order test to come on the board and then another order test to because of that rule? No, you just do one. So at least that's in my eyes. It wouldn't make sense to have to be double penalized because of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That might be covered in the FAQ somewhere. Not 100% on that, but it might be.
I think you're right. Yeah, there's I can't remember where it was, but essentially it's you would end up taking the worst roll. So you're doing your reserve roll, right? So
yeah. I find that 1-man turret rule, like I have yet to use a tank with that rule, but I feel like it's an all or nothing. Because to avoid that, I feel like you'd either be sitting still doing a fire order, or you're doing a run to get into position.
Yeah.
Where there's not really any in between. It's all or nothing. One or the other. Make a choice.
Yep, essentially. Essentially, and some of the tanks, it's kind of, you look at their loadouts for weapons, and it's, yeah, you're sitting there because there's a lot of other rules sometimes that you do get, like this Renault FT. Essentially, this is a tank that was like, I guess, used or made at the final year of World War One. So it's really really early for World War Two, but it has the rule slow, pitifully slow. You're not running. There's no run with this thing. So you'll be doing order tests all the time for this. The I think it's the Char D1. It's a light. Has a light anti-tank with a coaxial MMG. One-man turret slow. So there it is again, right? So,
But there is a difference between slow, pitifully slow, and slow.
yes.
Because the slow rule is just in advance and you only move 6 inches, or you run and move 12. Where that pitifully slow is you literally do a run order, but you only move
I believe it's just 6
at
inches.
the basic speed only.
Yeah.
Yeah. And fun fact on that Renault FT, is that not the tank Patton commanded in World War One when the Americans joined?
Don't know. Maybe. I didn't.
Sure.
Could have been. I'm not 100% sure on that part of history. Really. Let us know. I'm sure somebody knows.
Somebody has to.
Yeah. It's a lot of these early war tanks are armaments and whatnot are not that great on them, and they have all these kind of rules, but miniature wise, I think it's great seeing them kind of on the board or just having them in your collection, right? So, and a lot of guys.
Cool to see variety.
Yeah, that's and that's the thing is a lot of guys who play these games, they just don't have one or two tanks. They have a collection, so it's pretty cool. I like it. Char D2, it's the same kind of thing, except that it has unreliable. So if it suffers one or more pin markers, it actually suffers an additional pin marker. So again, one-man turret. So probably not the best option, but depending on how thematic you're playing, or maybe it's in a theater selector that you can only use these tanks, that kind of thing. That's kind of where you're sitting at, right?
A lot of these tanks do have detrimental special rules, but keep in mind too, they are priced accordingly. Like that Char D2 here, that's 100 points at regular.
Yeah.
So they aren't the greatest, but they are not costing you much at all.
You would be surprised with these little tanks, early war wise. They can actually be really effective, even if they have those rules, those negative rules. Because a lot of times you don't really have anything to take them out, or you do, but you're not relying on a heavy anti-tank gun. It's a light anti-tank gun that you're, relying on. And we all know how one-shot weapons are in the game. Most of the time you're missing. You know what I mean? So,
yep.
But it is neat to see these tanks on the board. It is funny when you're firing a light anti-tank gun, or maybe you're firing an autocannon, right? And it's just, you're not, like, I'm not used to it a lot because most players play mid-late. So when I do go against somebody else who's playing early war, it's fun. It's super fun. I should just have a early war tank war battle at some point. And just have
that'd be great.
Yeah, just have all these small little tanks on the board. That'd be hilarious.
I had an early war tank game, actually against Jason. Funny you mentioned that. And the armor that absolutely went rampage on the table was a little Polish tankette with a 20 millimeter cannon. It was so odd to see Like, yeah, this little tankette, that's the Panther of this game right now. Interesting.
That little one that can hide behind the fence line, essentially, right? Yeah, yeah. No, it was funny. I was just thinking the same thing. Too bad Jason wasn't here. He would talk about that Polish tank. Yeah, that's a good one. Uh, good chuckles. Um, so the Renault, there's the R35, 39, and 40. Low velocity anti tank gun. Again, there it is. 3+ instead of 4+. It does have 8+ armor. You can upgrade the anti tank gun. Again, one man turret. Nice thing about this one is it has armored all around. So you're not going to get any bonuses, pretty much essentially firing it at any direction. So, and the Renault, they're iconic tanks as well, right? So, I think I got 2 of these. I think I got the 39s. Hotchkiss, H35, H38. What is the other one? H39, I think. Very
Yeah,
similar.
this is the model I picked up from Rubicon.
Okay.
It's a resin model, but that was some impressive. I've never seen a resin model with that degree of detail and quality. So, side note for anybody who's looking at Rubicon and sees it and says, "Oh, that's resin. That's not for me." Take another look. I was very surprised at that, and it comes with the options because there is a physical model difference between the H35 and the 38s and 39s. Because I think the 38s and 39s have the high velocity light anti tank gun, so the barrels are slightly different, and it comes with options for them.
Nice. And that's Rubicon. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't have Hotchkiss, but I'd like to have a good selection of vehicles for the French too. So
If you're not taking your army selection too far, you're not doing it right.
my French army was one of my largest armies at one point, and then I bought somebody's Soviet collection to add to my collection, and that was big. So, the FCM 36 essentially is pretty much the same, I believe, as the Hotchkiss.
Pretty well, at least for in-game rules. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Then you have the AMC 35, light anti-tank, coaxial, 8+. No negative rules on this thing.
If you were looking for a solid, dependable early war tank, I would say that would be a strong contender. 125 points at regular, no detrimental rules. That's not bad at all.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good. That probably would be the mainstay if you're taking, the tanks, like you said. Pretty good, pretty good. Next up, another classic one. Samoa S35. I always like the look of this tank.
I do too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like the little commander hanging out the back on the Warlord model.
They do that a lot with the French tanks.
Yes, they do.
Like I said, I have 2 of the Renaults, and one of them I have with the hatch closed, and the other one I have with the commander coming out of the hatch, which is pretty neat. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's an 8+. Again, now we go back to the one-man turret. The French turrets tend to be pretty small. So the one-man turret kicks into effect there. And this one has the improved front armor, so it goes up to a 9 on the front. Unlike the armored all around, just the front on this guy. But it doesn't have a wide front, silhouette kind of thing. So if you have it kind of parked in a decent spot, you can protect your sides still. You just gotta watch out on the flanks and stuff. But
In early war, if your opponent is also playing the early war era, I think that's huge.
oh
Pushing
yeah,
it up to armor 9 on the front.
yep,
If most of your threats are going to be like an anti-tank rifle or a light AT gun, even if they hit you, they're really only getting superficial damage on a 5. Say if a light AT gun's hitting you, right?
yep,
So that pushes, you could literally tank a lot more than you think you could. And it's only 135 points.
yeah, yeah. It's pretty
That's
cheap.
a nice little addition.
And that's the thing is these tanks aren't super expensive, and you still have lots of infantry on the board. So this is just it's just pure support that could, um, you can use it as a kind of a sledgehammer, right? Push up with your infantry, have your infantry support it so that it's not going to get wrecked on its side by some other infantry unit, and then use that frontal armor, and then also use it as cover, essentially, right? And that's what you're going to probably start to notice with some of the next two tanks, because they are long tanks. So the next one is the Char B1, B1 S BIS. So light anti-tank, coaxial. It has the forward-facing, I guess, light howitzer and the MMG as well. This is the one that I take. So it is slow. It's a 9+, 1-man turret, but it does have armor all around. And I tend to really use the howitzer on it. So it's just, again, it's another howitzer. It's another plate that I can throw on my opponent if it hits. Usually I'm trying to get like a direct shot on something, right? And the nice thing is you can use your turret to fire at something else if you need to. Have infantry come up on the side of it, protected to get where you need to go. It's slow moving, so you're not going very fast, but at least it's protecting some infantry, or essentially it's kind of just creeping up slowly and just plugging things, just trying to shoot things with its cannon, landing some hits, hopefully with the howitzer. But people look at it and it's like they kind of get a little worrisome. It's a little bit pricier, right? Because now you're in the 245 range for a regular, but it's still not that bad.
That price is not bad if you have 5 inexperienced squads.
Exactly. So
I have a personal little rule that I do not like spending over 200 points on any single order dice. That's why I find myself playing Germans very difficult.
oh yes,
But this would be the one time I would have no problem going over 200 on an order dice.
nice.
Just with all your, I think your armored all around makes a huge difference.
Yeah, at this era for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And the one great thing about this tank, I honestly think it's my favorite looking tank.
It does have some very awesome camo schemes.
Yeah,
When I was painting mine, I looked them up. Whew, that is a modeler's heyday right there.
and I'm gonna just put this out here with no shame. I do own 3 of them, so um, yeah. This tank itself, years ago, me and a close friend, we used to play a couple World War II games online, and this was the tank I always went towards. And I don't know, I just like the look of it. The shape, just the beefiness of it as well, and of course it's French, but Yeah, it's just kind of one of those iconic tanks. Just really, really like it, and I like the models. Miniature has some parts on it that are a little finicky. Um,
Yes.
so, and it's plastic. So, yeah, when you're assembling it, just watch that. Watch for that. I do find that's the one thing I do find with some of the tank miniatures is like if you don't transport it with some protection, like in a proper case or transport, you're going to run into some broken parts easy, right? Unlike some of the other companies that have a little bit more robust miniatures, that can take a slide or take a hit kind of thing or a bump. Some of these you have to watch out because they are still model kits in a sense, right? So
The other thing I like about the Char B1 is you can throw some caution to the wind with it. Thinking on my previous German comment there, let's say you have a Stug with the heavy AT gun, anything case mounted, right? You really got to be cautious that you position your tank so you can shoot the gun at what you need it to do without exposing your sides unnecessarily. For this being armored all around, you could throw caution to the wind. You could wheel the howitzer around to get that infantry on stage left and not care whatsoever. And then wheel the turret around and shoot at the armored car coming up at you. It's really player friendly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's pretty decent, and I do believe you'll notice this if you do play other armies, and you'll notice if you play Germans. I do believe they actually get to use these tanks as well. Um, and then I think they modified them to actually have flamethrowers.
Yes, they did.
So,
The pamphlet that comes in the booklet for this, if I
mhm.
remember it correctly, they have the French version, the German version, and then the German flamethrower version. Exactly like you were saying.
Yeah. So a lot of good options. Um, it's yeah, favorite tank by all means. Like I like it. And then we have the one I don't own. It's pretty expensive. The Char 2C.
Yeah, this thing is something else. I saw one of these at LVO this year.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, I had to do a double take and talk to the guy that brought it. It was impressive.
It's big.
It is.
It's very big. I have seen pictures of it, and having infantry being blocked by it as it's creeping up, kind of thing. Kind of funny to see. But essentially, it's like a land battleship, with all the weapons that it has on it. But surprisingly, it costs less than the other Char.
Yes.
So 190 for a regular. One turret-mounted light howitzer covering the front and side arcs. And then you have a turret-mounted MMG covering the rear and side arcs. Forward-facing MMG covering the front arc, one MMG covering the front and left, one MMG covering the front and right. So lots of weapons on it, lots of different angles that you can be firing these things, at different units. 9 plus for its armor, has slow. And then it has the company commander's vehicle can be up armored to damage value 10 as a heavy tank, and given the command vehicle rule at a cost of 105 points. So that's where your points kick in. So now you're 295.
Yeah, that puts you right on par though with most other nations for a heavy tank.
Yeah. Would I take it for that?
No, thank you.
No, because that's a lot of points, and there's probably going to be tanks out there that can probably chew it apart pretty quickly. So
If you're doing late war, sorry, if you're bringing this French book to late war, I definitely would not do that in a personal sense.
No,
And
no.
if you're sticking to you and your opponent doing early war, uh, to me, doing damage value from 9 to 10 in early war is very much diminishing returns. But that's my competitive hat looking at it.
Yeah, competitively, I mean, the game can be that, but I don't really see it myself. I don't really go that direction too much. I mean, there's still tactics in every game and all that stuff, but yeah, I don't know. It's a large target. It has a lot of guns on it, but you know, how much stuff is going to be on your rear? You know,
That is true.
right? Like, is it really going to be that effective? Is it going to get its points back? Probably not. You know, it's just a big centerpiece on the table, essentially a big rubber ducky.
This
But
one reminds me a lot of that big Soviet tank. I want to say
what is it?
something
BT.
35.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. It's again, yeah, it's that other, it's the other land battleship looking thing. Whole bunch of turrets on it and stuff.
Yeah, it's
Can't
them
remember
and the Finns that can take it, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I remember seeing an actual video of that thing trying to turn in a little town road. They had to back it up a few times to actually get it to turn.
Did they have to do the Austin Powers thing?
Essentially, yeah. So they couldn't make the turn, right? So, but yeah, this is one of those units that you put on the board for fun. I would say just
100%.
out of the blue, just roll it out, and just see what it does, kind of thing. I wouldn't use it in every game. They probably didn't really even have much of it actually out on the battlefields, anyways. But well, supposed to be a few
Yeah,
of them out there, but
yeah, there you go. Numbers manufactured, 10.
yeah. So, but interesting looking model. I know it's. I think this one's a resin and pewter hybrid as well. I think they actually have one at the shop, but again, it is also a pricey kit. I think it's close to like $100. So, tank destroyers, they don't have that many. Essentially, they are like trucks with anti-tank guns on them. So, and this is where you can. It's funny that most of the tanks don't have like. I don't think any of the tanks have any medium anti-tank guns, but these tank destroyers do, and they're soft skin 6+ soft skin trucks, with some of them have like rear facing guns.
And inexpensive, too.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. Essentially, that's what they are. Open platforms, 6+ soft skin, with anti-tank guns. And then you start going into like trucks and recce vehicles and armored cars. Schneider, low velocity anti-tank gun, that kind of stuff. Recce, 7+. Armored cars. You have your Panhards. Those are the ones probably I would take majority of the time. They also look cool.
Yes, they do. I got one myself.
Yeah, so do I. I have the Schneider and the Panhard. Um, so and then you go into like the Laffleys and stuff. Might be hard to find some of these miniatures. So I mean those two you kind of stuck with in a sense. Um, you have the other Panhard as well, 165, 75. Low velocity anti-tank guns can be upgraded. So again, these I think they all have recce, don't they? Yes.
All except for the AMR 33 and 35.
Yeah, that's
But
right.
I was just going to bring that up.
Hmm.
That is quite the selection for armored car.
Yep.
Between the French, Soviets and Germans, I would say those are the top three nations for good options in armored cars.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the French used them quite a bit. Quite a bit, considering they'd be faster than their tanks. So, yeah. So it's pretty good. You start going to transport and tows. Essentially, you will have your trucks. You have your armored carriers. You know what I'm kind of looking at here. Trucks can carry, like 12 men, 7 men with some of these armored carriers. The usual, pintle mounted weapons. They're kind of all over the place. You got that's an interesting one. The Lorraine 38 carrier can carry 12 men, and it's the 7+ armored carrier. 74 points for regular.
Ooh, I never caught that one. Yeah, that's interesting.
The Lafley S20 TL 6-wheel truck. I think that's the one I have. Apparently, it can have a command. It's a command vehicle. If you wanted to. Don't know if I would do that or not, but it's an option. What else we got here? Yeah, a couple different armored carriers, which is interesting. Weapons none. Options. Lorraine 37. Again, another armored carrier. So they have options for that. Model wise, again, might be hard to find some stuff. I'm sure they're out there. I haven't really looked too much into transports, as I don't use them that often, except for the one unit that I do use it with, but usually it's a truck. So, and that kind of comes to the end of vehicles and whatnot. And you do have theater selectors in this book. The Phony War, Battle of France, and Defense of Vichy as well. So you have three of them to play around with. Essentially, that's this book. In a little overview here in the podcast. I do like playing the army. It's fun for me to play it. I love seeing it on the board. There is a challenge with it because it is a little bit of an underdog. But again, France did have lots of issues in the war, of course, just with command and use of their equipment and the deployment and all that stuff, right? So being able to play them on the tabletop and actually get a victory is pretty neat. So yourself, Chris, I'm sure you're enjoying playing them.
So far, absolutely.
Nice.
Our slow grow league at this time of recording is still at 500 points. So I've really only played smaller points levels.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely looking forward to when we get up to 1,000, or even doing a pickup game at 1250.
Yep.
I think that would be very, very interesting.
We'll have to, you know what? I'll have to build, because I do have the models for it, but I'll make a early war German army. And we haven't played in a long time against each other, so yeah, I'll do an early war German army, and then we can square off one day and get a good little battle going. That'd be a lot of fun.
Sounds good. I might have to have you over. I got a very large, all painted early war German army.
Oh, there we go. Very nice.
Might just have your name all over it.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always fun having those fun battles like that, right? And usually they last for a few hours, and there's always good stories and moments behind them, which is pretty cool, and get to take some pretty cool pictures. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it for the Army of France. Only other thing is, if you want to expand on them, there are the other campaign books that you could go into. A lot more units, a lot more theater selectors. A lot more options. It gives a bit more flair to the army as well. I'm very pleased with the army. I'm very pleased that they had expanded on them, and I'm hoping that there may be a new miniature range that might be coming out, or they're changing some things. Not 100% sure. I'm just kind of guessing on that. Just heard a little tidbits here and there, so we'll see about that. Hopefully that happens this year.
That actually came out in a video released by Warlord. I don't remember when it came out, but they had their media day,
Yep.
and some of the videos they posted their Q&A sessions online to YouTube. And I'm sure if anybody was interested, you could look it up. And they did confirm that it's in the works for Plastic French from Warlord Games.
Yeah, and I think that's probably where I heard it, because I remember seeing some of these YouTube videos that came out on my feeds, and it's, some of the big guys there, right, talking
Yep.
about that stuff and people asking the questions. So which is really cool. I do like how Warlord Games does that. They're straight up with the communities and stuff, and they kind of show what's going on in the background, and what they're working on, or what their plans are, or how things are actually done for, when somebody starts asking about, are they going to make a set for this, for sprues for this, they come out and write and say, it costs $30,000 to come up with a set, so we have to decide where that money's going to go for what set and this and that, right? So, so I do like that. But again, the French army, it's fun to play. It's fun to work on, miniature wise and whatnot. Checking out the colors, the paints, um, there's a whole bunch of miniature ranges out there that you can see online. It's pretty neat. And then, of course, you can put your own little spin to it, you know. So, yourself, Chris?
I'm enjoying playing them. For
Excellent.
maybe those that are a little anxious and want to get started on their own French army and maybe aren't too interested in the early war French, there is the Battle of France book that adds some units to the French army. As we discussed, the Western Desert adds some units there. That's worth a good pickup, which is an excellent campaign book just in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And the Battle of the Bulge campaign book covers late war French once they start joining the fight after liberation. So, do with that information as you will, everyone.
Nice. And with that, there's a great opportunity for small little conversions for a late war French army, right? So,
Yes,
if you're
despite what everybody says, they are not just Americans with different flags.
yeah, there's a lot of little details that you can throw in, and if you're a hobbyist first, you appreciate that, and of course, if you're right into the historical, you definitely can add that flavor to your army. So, but again, Chris, thanks for joining me on this one. It's always fun to do these kind of episodes and chit chat.
Thank you for having me on.
No problem. So, hope you guys enjoyed that little overview of the army. It's not one of the big mainstream nations that everybody might play, but it gives you a little bit of insight in the army if you had any interests. If there's any comments or things you'd like to share with us, or even touch base with ideas that you had, please, let us know in the comments. You can email us, messenger us, all that stuff. Check out our Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. Share your pictures. We love seeing it. Check out all the socials. And we will, be continuing doing this throughout the year. Just kind of hitting up some of the armies and whatnot. I'm going to decide which one to do next. So, but yeah, we'll keep sharing this kind of stuff. We'll have some more hobby stuff happening as well. And hopefully you guys enjoy it all. And, keep rolling those dice on the tabletop. And we'll catch you guys next time.